Hello everyone, welcome to Dead Time Stories. I know many of you enjoy listening to these videos as you fall asleep. So before you drift off, I'd love for you to leave a comment letting me know where in the world you're tuning in from. And if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and subscribe. Alright, now let's get comfortable, relax, and dive into tonight's story. The house hadn't minded being empty. It minded being ignored, and now that someone had returned to listen, it began to clear its throat in the dark. Rain braided down the windows in silver threads while Daniel stood in the hall and watched the far door ease itself open as if the house were tasting the air. He had shut it 3 times already, each time with a firmer hand and a more practical explanation, old wood. Warped frame. The wet, expanding grain. Yet the hinge whispered again, and the gap widened. Not a sudden shove, but a patient, courteous invitation. "No," he said softly, not sure if he was talking to himself or to the house. And he pressed it closed with the heel of his palm until the latch clicked. The landlord's parting words nagged at him, "Give it time to get used to you," like advice one gives about a skittish animal. He brewed tea, carried it upstairs, and tried to read by the amber light of a single lamp. The pages rustled like leaves. The rain played a steady metronome on the roof. From the dark at the end of the hall came a soft tap, then a drawn-out hinge breath. So delicate he almost convinced himself he'd imagined it. He set the book down, stood, and found the door open again. A slim line of black peeling away from the jamb. "Okay," Daniel muttered. "Hard odlilite," like laughter at a funeral. He fetched a chair and wedged it under the knob. Angled, just so. When he returned to bed, the house creaked in long, old bones. And somewhere deeper beyond that door, something shifted like cloth settling on an unused bed. "It's the storm," he told the ceiling, but the house, pleased to have an audience, exhaled through its wooden lungs and waited for him to ask the next question. Sleep swayed between his ribs like a lantern on a hook, almost going out, almost catching. And in that drowsy edge, Daniel heard a minute scuff, a tender drag of something along floorboards beyond the barricaded door. He sat up. The rain had softened to a hush. The clock on the dresser ticked like a small creature's heartbeat. He cleared his throat and called, lightly, almost playfully. "Hello?" The word felt silly the moment it left him, but the house accepted it with good manners and returned a polite answer. One more scuff. Closer to the threshold, Daniel slid his feet into cold slippers and crossed the hall, feeling the give of old planks. Wood swells. Nails loosen, he narrated. As if for a camera he could not see, his own voice kept him steady. He touched the chair, felt the pressure of the knob against the seat as if a hand pressed back from the other side. "Ridiculous," he said, and the syllables sounded tinny here, like coins in a jar. He pulled out his phone. A bar of reception flickered and died. He typed a message to the landlord anyway. "Door at the end won't stay shut. Is there a trick?" and saved it unsent. When he returned to his room, he left his door a hand's breadth open and the light on low. In the quiet that followed, he heard the house choose a new sound, a faint, hesitant tapping that made him think of a child trying not to wake someone. It came and went in threes. He breathed with it. Slow in, slow out. And when sleep finally took him, it carried the rhythm like a tide pulling at his ankles. Morning diluted the house into softer shapes, dust like pale powder on the banister. Sun slanting along the runner. A vase full of dried thistles on a window stool that he hadn't noticed last night. The door at the end stood poised, an actor frozen mid-entrance. Daniel, carrying coffee, moved the chair, turned the knob, and pushed it open. The room smelled faintly of starch and lavender, a scent so clean it felt tender. A sewing table sat near the window, pins in a velvet tomato, a brass thimble tilted like a crown. A rocking chair faced the wall, as if whoever had used it wanted to stare at paint rather than look outside. "Anyone there?" he asked. Ridiculous again. But at least he was laughing. The boards here were less dusty, as if a breeze had licked them. On the sill, an ivory button lay like a lost tooth. He nudged the rocking chair, and it gave a slow, reluctant sway. Somewhere under the floor, a string whispered against wood. A narrow closet held thread spools bleeding faded colors. In a small drawer, he found a marble, a clear glass eye with a pale swirl, cool as rain. When he rolled it in his palm, it clicked softly against his wedding band he no longer wore. He flinched at the memory and shut the drawer. "Room," he said. "We've met." Saying it calmed him. He left the door open out of courtesy, set the chair aside, and told himself the house would be satisfied now that it had been seen. As he walked away, the marble, which he had absolutely left in the drawer, rolled across the floor behind him and tapped his heel like a child asking to be picked up. He worked at the kitchen table until dusk emails, an overdue report, the gentle, guilty work of speaking into a life that had gone suddenly quiet. The house hummed in sympathetic vibration. Pipes ticked. The icebox coughed. A shutter clucked its tongue against brick. When evening came, Daniel took the marble from his pocket and set it on the bedside table. Acknowledging the odd adoption with a shrug, he left the end door open, a careful angle, as if a guest insisted on a little air. Somewhere near midnight, the storm returned. Not the hungry, rattling kind, but a lullaby storm with long blue breaths between flashes. The light in the hall wavered, dimmed, recovered. Daniel dreamed of water creeping under a door, shining and silent, filling a hallway to the top like a glass, and woke to a wet chill around his ankles that vanished when he swung his feet to the floor. In the sewing room, the rocking chair faced the window now. He didn't remember turning it. On the sill, the button had rolled to the center, as if pulled by a magnet. "All right," he whispered. Not unkindly, back in bed, he watched the marble. It trembled, rolled half an inch, then stopped. Far away, a bell rang, one thin, single note, a farmhouse bell. He counted nothing. He almost phoned someone just to plant a flag in the ordinary world. But who? He thought of a laugh he used to hear in the next room. It hurt like a bruise to remember it. When he finally drifted, the house exhaled and, almost grateful, let him sleep without dreams for a while. He met a neighbor at the gate after noon, a slight woman in a heavy sweater, despite the warming air. Pale hair pinned with a clip carved like a leaf, she introduced herself as Maris. Voice steady as a tea kettle left off the boil. "Saw your car," she said. "Figured you'd want eggs." She held a carton like an offering. "I won't be long," Daniel said, though he had nothing urgent to do, and they stood with fence wire between them. "You took Haynes's place?" Maris nodded toward the house. "Old family home. We used to hear their piano on Sundays." Daniel explained the door that wouldn't stay closed. Maris was polite enough not to smile. "It was Ida's room," she said. "She did fittings there, hems. Wedding fals. Little capes for girls in the winter." A passing cloud made both of them blink. "They had a daughter?" Maris added carefully. "Lena ran fast, climbed everything, fell ill, and fell quiet. After she went, Ida kept the door open for her. Silly. I know, like a porch light. Not silly, Daniel said, though he felt a pocket of cold open under his ribs. Was there a bell? Maris's head angled. Funny you ask. There's a servant bell from the back porch. Line runs through the walls. Wind rings it now and then. She shifted the eggs. It's a good house, she said with an odd weight. It just hates pretending nothing happened. When she left, Daniel stood with the carton cooling his palms and watched the second-floor window. For a moment the curtain breathed inward, though no window was open. He could have sworn it breathed twice. Back inside, the sewing room had a newly attentive air, like a patient child when an adult finally asks what's wrong. Daniel knelt and tapped floorboards until a hollow answered, prying carefully with a butter knife. He lifted a plank and found a shallow cavity lined with old newspaper. Inside lay 3 letters tied with faded ribbon, a cracked hair comb with one missing tooth, and a cameo brooch the color of tea. He hesitated, felt intrusive, then unfolded the top letter. The paper smelled like attics and summer heat. The handwriting leaned right, neat as stitches. To my girl, it began. And Daniel read it aloud because speaking the words softened their ache. It was Ida, writing to Lena about small things, the price of sugar. A new hymn. A fox seen at dusk while the unsaid thing crowded every line. The second letter was shorter. Keep the door open. It's easier. Somehow. The third wasn't addressed. It was a list. Morphine laundry ring bell. If she wakes, don't show the mirror door stays open. His voice caught on the last item, and he placed the page very gently back in its bed. I'm sorry, he said into the room. Unsure to whom, the marble, balanced on the sill, gave a brave little roll to his palm. He laughed in spite of himself. All right, he said, as if making a pact. We'll keep the door open. Downstairs. He brewed tea and, without quite admitting it to himself, set another cup across from his own. Nobody drank it, but the steam curled like a contented cat. And for the first time since arriving, Daniel felt the house lean toward him, not with hunger but with relief. In the evening, a wind came with a different signature, higher, drier, full of burrs rattling the eaves in a language the house did not like. Lights flickered and failed. The rooms folded in on candlelight. Daniel found a stubby box of matches and, as he struck them, felt a childish thrill at the sulfur pop. Shadows thickened. Stairs became an instrument the darkness knew how to play. He sat at the bottom step and listened as the house tuned itself. A ceiling seam gave a wet sigh. A distant hinge complained, and then, distinctly, footsteps crossed above him, slow, careful, bare. He rose before he could think better and called, Maris, knowing it couldn't be. The footsteps paused. Lena, he whispered, scarcely aware he'd spoken the name until the air accepted it. The steps came to the landing. He saw nothing. But the candle flame leaned as if something had approached to warm its hands. You can come down, Daniel said, not performing now, not narrating to himself, just speaking to the air the way one speaks through a cracked door to a child who is woken from a bad dream. The steps retreated. Okay, he murmured. He climbed, candle lighting an amber island with every inhale. At the top, the sewing room door stood open like a stage. Inside, the rocking chair was turned toward him. In the seat lay the cameo brooch he'd returned to the cavity, its tiny profile watching the ceiling. You brought it out, he said, and around the words curled a feeling like gratitude that wasn't entirely his. The bell rang once, faint and far, and then Like a decision whispered by two people at once, the candle went out. Darkness had a body. It pressed gently at his shoulders, cupped his eyes. Daniel stayed very still on instinct, and in that stillness he heard a line tremble through the walls like a harp string plucked. The bell again. A little nearer. He held the spent candle and felt the room through his feet. A rope passed under the floorboards. A servant's line threaded through joists and plaster, running from the porch to a belle chic by-jowl with bedroom doors, the house's old nervous system. He pictured tiny hands yanking when fever was high. "I'm here," he said, and his voice did not echo, it soaked in. In the dark, a softer sound began. Neither wind nor mouse, a slow scratch. Fingertip against wood. It came from the far corner of the sewing room, where the wall met the closet. He stretched his hands blind and found the corner colder than the rest. The plaster smoother, too smooth, as if repainted often to hide something that kept returning. The scratching ceased. He pressed his palm flat and felt unmistakably a draft seeping through hairline gaps. "A door behind the door," he murmured. He fumbled for a match, struck it, and the sulfur blew through the corner into small, truthful light, faint soot prints smudged at knee height. The ghost of a hand at adult height, like the marks children leave on stairwells when told to hold the rail. The line quivered again. The bell. "Nearer now," gave two quick notes urgency. Daniel set the match to a new candle, lifted it, and the flame reflected in something round half hidden in the baseboard, a lens, the marble. But he'd left it upstairs. It winked like an eye and rolled a finger's width toward the crack in the wall, as if pointing. The house waited, polite, braced between asking and telling. "All right," Daniel breathed, and reached for the seam as the wind outside took a long, deliberate breath of its own. The seam in the wall resisted like a locked jaw. Daniel ran his fingers along the plaster until he found the faintest indent, no wider than a coin's edge. The candle flame trembled, sketching nervous shadows across the sewing table. But he pressed the point of his butter knife into the line and felt the plaster give with a brittle sigh. A crack ran upward, and when he leaned his shoulder against it, a thin door opened inward onto a dark cavity. Dust poured out like old breath, dry and musty, carrying a sweetness beneath lavender again. Faint and aching, inside lay a crawl space no taller than his waist. He crouched and raised the candle. The beam painted rough beams, bundled rope, and a wooden trunk. It was no larger than a toy chest, but the iron latches shone faintly as though polished by recent fingers. Daniel's mouth dried. "You want me to see this?" he said aloud, and the silence afterward felt approving, like a nod in the dark. He crawled in, dragging the trunk out inch by inch until it sat in the sewing room. He studied it, candlelight warping its brass corners. "All right then," he whispered. Kneeling, the latch was cool, colder than the air around it. When it clicked open, a draft slid across his hand like a sigh of relief. Inside lay fabric children's dresses, folded neatly, yellowed with age, lace sleeves, a pair of tiny slippers, cracked at the seams, a diary bound in maroon leather, and beneath these, wrapped in a towel, something harder, heavier, that he hesitated to touch. The bell in the walls gave a single sharp clang, and the candle guttered. He reached anyway, pulling free the wrapped object and setting it on the floor. The cloth unwound, and there lay a porcelain doll with one glass eye missing. Where its socket should have been, something glimmered, the marble. The doll's painted mouth seemed to smirk in the flickering light, and Daniel. Uncomfortably aware of how close the flame leaned toward cloth, set the candle in the rocking chair. "She kept you," he murmured, as though addressing the porcelain figure. Its single green eye gleamed with varnished patience, while the marble in its hollow socket pulsed faintly like a captured star. He almost laughed. It was absurd, but the longer he stared, the more the doll seemed less like a toy and more like a photograph of a child seen through cracked glass. He lifted the diary instead, letting the fragile leather fall open on its own. The first page bore Lena's looping hand. "Mama says to keep the door open. It makes her feel better. But I don't like the draft at night," Daniel read softly, voice trembling. "If I ring the bell, sometimes she comes, sometimes she doesn't. Sometimes the door creaks, and I hear her voice in the hall. But when I look, the hall is empty." He turned the page. "The doll watches me. I gave it my marble because it lost its eye. Now it blinks when I sleep. Mama says I dream it, but the bell rings itself sometimes. Even when I'm not sick." Daniel shut the diary gently, heart thumping. He looked at the doll again. In the hush, he could swear it was leaning, just slightly, toward him. "What do you want me to do?" he asked. The bell's rope thrummed through the walls. A quick tremor. 2 floors below. The bell clanged once, twice. Insistent, he grabbed the candle and hurried downstairs, pulse skipping. In the kitchen, the other teacup he had left untouched now held steam curling upward, faint and fresh, though he had not boiled water since morning. He stood at the table until the steam thinned to nothing. The cup sat perfectly centered, porcelain pale as bone. He touched it. The china was warm. His stomach dropped. "You're showing me," he said, though his voice cracked. He sank into the chair opposite, staring at the place he had set out the cup the night before in jest. "You want company," the house groaned, timber flexing under unseen weight. "Or remembrance," he added. And because silence seemed wrong, he whispered, "Tell me if I'm wrong." The bell in the wall gave a soft chime, gentle as wind through glass. He exhaled shakily. "Okay, I'll stay. I'll listen. Upstairs." The rocking chair began to sway, a patient rhythm. He carried the candle back up, its flame shrinking and stretching. The doll sat exactly as before, one marble eye glinting. But now the diary lay open where he had left it closed, his breath stilled. The page read in Lena's hand. "If someone finds this, don't shut the door. Don't cover the mirror. Don't leave me alone." A blot of ink trailed at the end, as though the pen had been pulled from her hand mid-stroke. "Not alone," Daniel promised aloud. His voice surprised him with its firmness. For the first time since arriving, the house felt less like a stranger and more like something fragile, aching. Yet, as he leaned closer to close the book, he noticed something new in the sewing room mirror, the faint outline of a child's face. Pal, watching him with quiet expectation. The reflection was subtle enough to doubt a trick of candlelight, the smear of dust across the glass. Yet Daniel could not look away. A small face, maybe 8 or 9, long hair draped to one side, lips parted slightly as if about to speak. His throat tightened. "Lena?" he whispered. The mirror clouded faintly, as though a breath had fogged it from the inside. He reached out, hand trembling, and pressed his palm to the cold surface. The face didn't vanish. Instead, the marble rolled a half-inch across the sill, tapping once against the frame of the window. Daniel spun no draft, no tilt, just the deliberate movement of something unseen. He turned back. The mirror was empty now, reflecting only himself and the wavering candle flame. His chest ached with the effort of breathing. He turned the glass to the wall, covering it with an old sheet draped over the rocking chair. The air in the room seemed to tighten. The bell gave a protesting jangle. "Sorry," he muttered, pulling the cloth back. The reflection did not return, but the tension drained like water through cracks. "You want the mirror," he said. He left it uncovered, angled slightly toward the doll. The diary page had changed again, the words smeared. Letters rearranged into a shaky scrawl, "Keep looking." He backed away, candlelight shivering over the plaster. "All right," he said softly. "I'll look, just not all at once." The marble sat gleaming in the doll's face. Patient, unblinking. Downstairs, the eggs Maris had given him rattled in their carton, one after another, cracking faintly without touch. The sound drew him down to the kitchen. 4 eggs lay fractured, thin yolk spreading like golden ink across the counter. He reached for a towel, but the shell halves quivered, clicked against each other, and fell still. His nerves hummed like wires. He mopped the mess, muttering apologies to no one. Then heard it, footsteps overhead, not the hesitant scuff of before, but a deliberate pacing across the second-floor hall. He froze. The steps halted, as though listening. He gathered courage, candle in humped, and climbed. At the landing, the sewing room door was shut tight. The chair had been moved neatly. Placed against the wall, he touched the knob, cold as riverstone. He pressed it open slowly. Inside, the candlelight revealed the rocking chair now centered in the room. The doll sat in it upright, hands resting neatly in its porcelain lap, but the marble eye was gone. He turned, scanning the floor. Nothing. The diary lay open again. "Look harder." He crouched, running his palm along the boards. Near the closet, something clicked under his fingers. He pried with the knife and lifted another plank. Beneath was darkness. A narrow cavity sloped downward into the house's bones. From below, a faint green glimmer winked the marble's missing eye. Deep inside, the crawl space beneath the floor breathed a stale draft up his face. Daniel's candle flame bent downward, painting only shadows into the hole. He lowered himself onto his belly, stretching an arm inside, fingertips brushing dust and grit. The marble gleamed just beyond reach. "Of course," he muttered. He fished deeper until his shoulder scraped wood. His fingers touched it cold, slick like wet glass. As he pinched it, a voice whispered soft, "Hi." Not quite sound, but memory. "Don't drop me." He flinched so hard he nearly let it fall, but managed to clutch it tight and pull free. Back in the candlelight, it looked ordinary again. A simple child's marble, but its surface was warm as though held in a living hand. The diary page had changed once more. 3 words now scrawled across it. "Hold it close." He swallowed, pocketing the marble. The doll's hollow socket stared blankly from the rocking chair. For the first time, he pitied it. "You'll get it back," he told the doll. "I promise." The air eased slightly, the candle flame steadier. Still, he could not shake the sensation that something in the walls had shifted like a sleeper rolling to its other side. When he turned to leave, the mirror caught him again. This time, no child's face, just the reflection of the room. Except in the mirror, the doll already had both eyes, and they were watching him. He stepped back, nearly dropping the candle. His reflection did not move in time with him. It lagged half a second, head turning slower, as though the mirror were remembering what to do. Daniel raised the candle higher. His mirrored self stared back, expression drawn tight. Then, faintly, something else shimmered behind his reflection, a child's silhouette. standing in the hall, small shoulders hunched. He spun around. Nothing there. He turned back. The mirror was empty now, only his own face. Pale and slick with sweat. Enough, he whispered, covering it again with the cloth, despite the bell's faint, indignant jangle. Enough for tonight. He left the sewing room, shutting the door softly, but leaving it unlatched. In his own room, he placed the marble on the table, close enough to see but far enough not to touch. He lay awake long after, listening to the board sigh, sometime near dawn. Drowsiness pulled him under. He dreamed of a child standing beside his bed, holding the marble out to him, whispering, "Don't leave me here." He woke with a start, hand outstretched in the empty air. The marble still sat on the table, faintly gleaming with dew that should not have been there. The next day, Daniel sought Morris again. She met him at the fence. Arms folded, he hesitated, then confessed. The doll, the diary, the marble. Her face tightened, but she did not laugh. Lena had a doll, she said softly, carried it everywhere. Ida hated it, said it watched too close. After Lena died, Ida locked it away. We thought she burned it. Maris's eyes drifted toward the house. Some things don't stay buried, Daniel asked. What about the mirror? Maris looked sharply at him. Cover it. But when I did, the house, cover it, she repeated, voice low, urgent. That mirror was cracked once, years ago. Haynes tried to board it. Ida insisted it remain, said Lena wanted it, but after, she trailed off. Pressing her lips together, that's where she lingers. If she lingers anywhere. Daniel's mouth went dry. What happens if... Don't keep looking, Maris said, and turned away, retreating across the field, alone again. Daniel faced the house. The upper window curtain shifted, not with wind, but with the distinct dip of weight pressing against glass, as though someone small leaned to watch him return. The air inside greeted him like a damp handshake, clinging and familiar now. Daniel left the marble on the table in his bedroom before going to the sewing room. Though his fingers hesitated, the door stood wide as if expecting him. The doll still sat in the rocking chair, its single eye glinting with patient intelligence. The mirror remained uncovered, tilted toward the doll, but its surface was quiet. He took the diary in hand again, half dreading what new message might have bled across its pages. Today, the handwriting was faint. Hurried. Ask her. He frowned. Ask who? The bell jangled once from deep in the wall. He carried the book downstairs, setting it on the table beside the untouched teacup from the night before. If you can write, he said softly, then write here. I'm listening. The page fluttered, slowly. Faint lines formed. She won't let me sleep. Daniel felt his scalp prickle. He tapped the words with his fingertip. Your mother? The letters blurred. Reformed? No, the other one. The air in the room thickened like steam. He swallowed hard. The other one, he repeated. The bell jangled again. Louder this time, like a warning. That night, he could not stay away from the mirror. He left the cloth folded neatly over the chair, but did not cover it. Watching its dark surface flicker in the candlelight, the diary lay open beside him, the pen he had brought sitting uselessly at its side. He tried once, scrawling, "Who is the other one?" The page remained blank. Then, in the mirror, movement, aripo, like a fish beneath water. The reflection showed him, but something shifted in the room behind him. He twisted nothing but the rocking chair. When he faced the mirror again, his reflection smiled, His real mouth did not. No. Daniel breathed. No. That's not me. The reflection tilted its head, wide-eyed, innocent, like a child mimicking an adult. Then a hand appeared on its shoulder, pale and long-fingered, leading downward into shadow. Daniel clutched the marble in his pocket as if it were a talisman. The reflection froze, mouth still bent in that terrible, wrong smile. Then, across the diary's page, words bled in jagged script. Don't trust the mirror. The bell clanged once in agreement. Once. Daniel pulled the cloth over the mirror despite the diary's ink still wet. The room exhaled, timbers easing, candle flame steadier. Thank you. He whispered to whatever listened, yet sleep did not come. He lay in his bed, staring at the ceiling, hearing faint knocks traveling the length of the house like someone crawling inside the walls. Just as drowsiness began to claim him, a sharp clink woke him. He sat up. The marble on the nightstand trembled and rolled until it stopped at the very edge, as if urging him to take it again. He cupped it in his palm. You want me with you? He murmured. The diary downstairs rustled, though no wind stirred. He found it open. A single new line written, "Come to the bell." He lit a candle and followed the rope line down through the narrow cellar stairs he had barely noticed before. The stone steps descended into a cramped, dirt-floored chamber where the bell hung crooked on a rusted hook. Green with age, it swayed once, though Daniel had not touched it. The marble pulsed faintly warm in his hand. The cellar air was damp, earth-scented, too tight for comfort. He held the candle close, studying the bell. It was small, bronze, its clapper worn thin. The rope attached disappeared upward into the house. You're the spine, Daniel muttered, connecting everything. The bell swayed again, lightly tapping the hook. He reached out and steadied it. The marble in his hand grew hotter until he winced. He placed it against the bell instinctively, and the entire cellar pulsed with soundless vibration. His candle flame flattened sideways, as if a storm wind had passed. When it righted, Daniel heard breathing, not his own, a shallow, raspy exhale, coming from the dark corner beyond the bell. He raised the candle. There, pressed against the wall, stood the porcelain doll, both eyes intact. No, he whispered. You're upstairs. But the doll remained, grinning faintly, shadow flaring around its head like a crown. He stumbled back, clutching the marble. When he blinked, the corner was empty again. Only dirt and cobwebs. The bell trembled once more. A faint metallic whine. From the ceiling above came the soft laughter of a child. Daniel bolted from the cellar, half stumbling up the narrow stairs, candle flame nearly guttering out. In the kitchen, he paused, chest heaving. Silence pressed heavy again, but his skin tingled as if eyes followed him from every corner. He forced himself upstairs to the sewing room. The doll sat neatly in the rocking chair, one eye empty again. The diary lay closed, ribbon tied around it as though it had never been disturbed. I saw you, he accused. His voice cracked in the empty room. Down there. You can't be in both places. The doll sat silent, patient. His heart pounded so hard he thought the house might hear. He set the marble in the socket carefully. The porcelain face looked whole again, and for a breath he thought he saw relief, almost tenderness, softened the room. The bell gave one faint chime. Content. Is that what you wanted? He asked. The diary rustled, ribbon loosening, page flipping open on its own. 2 words written large, not done. The rocking chair shifted gently, as though some small weight had just climbed into it. He slept little, When dawn finally broke, he went outside into the wet grass, desperate for air that wasn't filtered through the old walls. Birds sang. Fresh and ordinary, the world looked normal again. Maris appeared, walking the path with a basket. She studied his face. "You look worse," she said gently. Daniel laughed bitterly. "The house doesn't rest." She gave him bread and touched his arm. "It won't harm you." "Not if you mind the rules," he asked. "And if I break them?" Her eyes turned serious. "Then it remembers you differently." He frowned. "Differently how?" She shook her head. "It keeps you, not whole, just the part that listened." Her words chilled him worse than the cellar. "Maris," he said, voice low. "There's something else here, not just Lena. Something she called the other one." Maris's lips pressed thin. Ida prayed for Lena. But sometimes she prayed too hard. Houses catch prayers like dust. Sometimes they shape them into something else. Daniel felt the marble heavy in his pocket. "Then what do I do?" She handed him the basket, her hand lingering on his. "Keep the door open. Keep the mirror clear. And if the other one answers, don't believe what it says." That night, Daniel sat in the sewing room deliberately, candlelight pooling against the walls. The doll, with its marble eye, watched him from the rocking chair, its painted smile less sinister now, almost weary. The mirror reflected them both. "I'll wait," he told the room. "But you'll tell me what you need." The diary page fluttered open. Words formed slowly. "Stay with me." His throat tightened. "For how long?" The ink blurred, ran, then resolved again. "Until morning." He nodded. "All right." He remained in the chair by the table, candle burning low. Hours stretched. The house groaned, sighed. Twice he heard footsteps outside in the hall. But when he opened the door, nothing stood there. At one point, the marble eye in the doll flickered faintly, casting green light on the wall like reflected water. He sat steady, refusing to flinch. Toward dawn, the candle sputtered and died. The house fell still. The doll's eye dimmed. The diary closed with a sigh. He blinked awake in the chair as pale sunlight crept through the window. For the first time, the house felt quiet, even gentle. Yet the words remained burned into him. "Stay with me until morning." Morning calm did not last. When he reached for the diary again, the page that had closed itself revealed fresh words. "Don't leave tonight." He felt his pulse quicken. "Why not?" he whispered. The ink spread, dripping downward across the page. "She will come." The air chilled so sharply that his breath clouded. "The other one," he murmured. He slammed the book shut, carried it downstairs, and left it on the table. For hours, he avoided the sewing room, walking the fields instead, trying to anchor himself in the ordinary. By evening, storm clouds gathered heavy, and the house seemed to shrink into itself, timbers tight with anticipation. He forced himself back upstairs before dark. The doll's marble eye had fallen out again. Resting neatly on the sill, the mirror quivered, as if its surface were liquid. He did not touch it. The diary opened by itself. 3 words bled bold and jagged. "Don't answer her." Then the bell began to ring. Not a single chime. Not 2. A full peal. Desperate and shrill, shaking dust from the rafters. From the mirror came a sound low, coaxing like a woman's voice murmuring his name. "Daniel." The voice rose from the mirror, sweet and low, like a mother calling her child in from play. He froze at the threshold. "Don't answer," he reminded himself. The diary shook on the table, pages whipping as though in wind. The bell pealed again, the rope thrumming through the walls like veins gone wild. The mirror rippled. In it, His reflection looked back. Lips moving though, his own mouth stayed shut. "Daniel, let me out. You've kept the door open." Just like she asked. "I've waited so long." His own mirrored eyes filled with pleading, his stomach clenched. "You're not Lena," he whispered. The reflection smiled faintly. "Names don't matter here, only promises." Behind him, the doll rocked gently. Marble eye glowing faint green. The diary's ink bled dark across a page. Stark as blood, not her. He staggered back, covering the mirror with both hands. The surface burned cold against his palms, vibrating faintly as if something pressed hard from the other side. "No," he hissed. "Not tonight." The bell gave one final clang and then fell silent. When he pulled the cloth over the mirror again, the house sighed a long, relieved exhale. But in the silence after, he swore he still heard a woman humming softly, muffled, from inside the wall. He dreamt of corridors that stretched too far, lined with doors that leaned inward, whispering as he passed. At the end, a child's hand tugged his sleeve. "Don't go that way," Lena said, her marble-bright eyes wide. "That's where she keeps her teeth." He woke with a start. Dawn light bleeding pale across the floor. The sewing room door stood ajar. He rose, heavy-limbed, and stepped inside. The mirror remained covered, but faint scratches had etched themselves into the glass's edge, clawing at the border of the cloth. The doll's marble eye was gone again, though the socket glistened wet as if recently filled. On the sill sat not the marble, but a tooth, small, white, too human. His stomach churned. "No," he whispered, backing away. The diary weighted open. Today's words were jagged, almost illegible. "She's hungry." He slammed it shut. "Enough. Downstairs." He nearly tripped over the basket Maris had left bread. Still warm, he carried it inside, grateful for its normal weight. Yet when he set it on the table, he found crumbs already scattered, as if someone had taken a bite before him. The next evening, Daniel forced himself to stay downstairs. He lit every lamp, brewed tea, opened a book, the ordinary rituals of life. Yet the house refused peace. Footsteps pattered above. The bell gave a restless twitch every few minutes, like a nervous muscle. Finally, he heard a knock, not at the door, but at the mirror upstairs. 3 sharp raps, clear as knuckles on glass. He sat frozen. The diary downstairs opened with a papery gasp. Ink spread across its page. "Don't go." He shoved it aside and stood anyway. His feet carried him against his own judgment. At the top of the stairs, the sewing room glowed faint green. The mirror's cloth had been pulled down. In its glass, he saw not himself but a small girl sitting on the floor, hands cupped as though cradling something delicate. She looked up. Her eyes were marbles, swirling green. "Alive, play with me," she whispered. And though her lips did not move, the words reached him, behind her. Deeper in the reflection, something taller leaned from the shadows, long hands resting on her shoulders. Daniel stumbled back. The bell screamed again. Louder, faster, like panic. He ripped the cloth from the floor and threw it over the mirror. The humming stopped. The bell slowed, then fell silent. He collapsed into the hallway, trembling. For hours he sat against the wall, candle guttering low. When he rose, dawn had bled into the house. He dragged the diary outside. Furious, "Enough," he shouted into the morning air. "No more games. No more riddles. Tell me what you want." Pages flapped madly, ink slashing across them in loops. Lines, spirals until they resolved into words. Stay, stay, stay. He hurled the book into the grass, but when he returned inside, it already lay open on the sewing table. Ribbon curled like a tongue. His shoulders sagged. You'll never let me go. Will you? The bell jangled once. Gentle, almost kind. He sank into the rocking chair. Exhausted. The doll faced him squarely. Both eye sockets empty now. He reached for his pocket. The marble was gone. He looked to the sill. Gone. He glanced at the mirror. Under the cloth, something faintly pulsed. Green and steady. Like a heartbeat. Maris came by midday. Concern etched across her face. You look worse than last time. He confessed everything. The marble, the mirror, the diary, the voice. Her lips pressed thin. You've been answering it. Not always, he argued, but sometimes that's enough. She cut in. Once it knows your voice, it won't stop. He stared at her. What is it? Maris shook her head. Not Lena, not Ida. Something else that lives in what they left behind. You fed it. With what? Attention. Promise. Fair. It eats what you give it. He almost laughed bitterly. Then what's left of me now? She reached into her basket, pulling out a small silver cross. Keep this near. It's not much. But sometimes it reminds them what they're not. He accepted it with shaking hands. Will it stop it? Her eyes met his. Heavy. No, but it might remind you who you are. She turned to leave, pausing once more. And if the other one calls you again, don't just ignore it. Drown it out. Sing. Pray. Talk to yourself anything. Just don't leave silence. Silence is how it learns your name. That night, silence stalked him anyway. He hummed tunelessly, muttering half-remembered prayers. But the house leaned closer with every breath. The diary wrote on its own. But he refused to look. The bell twitched in the walls. Finally, the mirror began to hum back. A low vibration felt in his teeth. He dragged the cross into his palm, whispering, I am here. I am Daniel. The mirror rattled under its cloth. A muffled laugh echoing. Not for long. The voice crooned, distorted now, layered with tones both low and high. The bell pealed again. Frantic, he shouted over it, reciting names his daughter's, his ex-wife's, his father's, grasping at his own anchor. The mirror hissed, then fell silent for a long moment. The house, too, was quiet. He dared to pull the cloth back. In the mirror, his reflection sat exactly as he was, cross-clenched. Breath ragged, but slowly, deliberately. It opened its other hand, empty in reality, revealing the marble gleaming in the glass. The child's voice echoed once more. Soft, pleading, don't let go. Don't. The night pressed long and sleepless. When morning arrived, Daniel's reflection still clutched the marble in the mirror. His real palm was empty. He slammed the cloth back over the glass and stumbled downstairs, sick with fatigue. The diary lay on the kitchen table. Already open. Don't cover it. Not anymore. He pushed it away, clutching the silver cross. By afternoon, exhaustion dragged him into shallow sleep on the couch. He woke to the sound of footsteps. A girl stood at the bottom of the stairs, pale, barefoot, hair hanging loose. She looked at him with wide eyes. You can help me, she whispered. His mouth went dry. Lena? The girl shook her head slowly. Her smile widened unnaturally. No, but she's here too. His heart thudded. He grabbed the cross, raising it between them. The girl hissed, face twisting, and in a blink, she was gone. Only the creak of the step where she'd stood remained. The diary flipped furiously upstairs, though he had left it down here. "No," he whispered, clutching the cross tighter. "Not today." He forced himself into the sewing room as dusk fell, determined to face it directly. The doll sat in its chair, both sockets hollow, porcelain grin fixed. The diary lay open, trembling. The mirror's cloth had been pulled aside, though he had covered it hours before. His reflection stared back, exhausted, haunted. Behind it, the child figure lingered, eyes glowing faint green. "Why?" Daniel demanded. "Why me?" The reflection smiled faintly. "Because you answered." The child stepped forward in the glass, closer to his mirrored self. Her voice echoed, layered now with another tone beneath it. Stay with me." He pressed the cross to the mirror's cold surface. A high-pitched wail split the air. The glass shuddered, rippling like water. For a moment, he saw not himself, not the child, but a shape tall and gaunt, face obscured, hands too long, standing behind the girl, its head tilted toward him. The diary's ink exploded across its pages in one word, over and over. "Run." The bell screamed as if the whole house rang at once. Daniel stumbled back as the mirror cracked, a fine fissure running down its center, blading faint green light. The fissure crawled down the mirror like frost, bleeding a thin green that wasn't light so much as memory. And the bell's rope thrummed through the studs like a vein you could feel with your palm. Daniel didn't run. He let the house breathe around him those long, ribby exhalations and spoke into the clamor the way you soothe a panicked animal. "Door stays open," he said. Steady. "I am Daniel. I keep watch." The diary flipped itself wildly, then stilled. A single word inked in a child's careful hand, "Stitch." He looked to the sewing table. The velvet tomato bristled with needles. The old spool of red thread sat with a tail like a tongue. "Stitch what?" he asked, though the answer was already tugging at his hands. He threaded a curved needle, knuckles shaking, and pressed the cloth back to the glass. Every pass bit his fingertip and left a ruby dot in the cotton. He whispered names under his breath. Ida. Lena. Daniel like knots in a rosary. With each stitch, the bell's panic softened to a tight, metallic whine. The other voice cooed from beyond the veils of reflection. "Careful. Careful, don't close what you promised to keep open." He set the needle anyway. The crack shuddered. The green receded. The cloth drew taut. "Hems aren't walls," he said aloud, surprising himself with the calm that arrived when he spoke as if Ida could hear. "They're lines that keep shapes honest." The rocking chair scraped forward an inch, as though in agreement. The last stitch quivered. He did not tie it off some instinct, or the house itself stayed his fingers. He let the thread hang like a vein, sealing itself with time, and the glass, offended but contained, stopped bleeding. At noon, Maris found him on the steps with dried blood moons on his fingertips and threads stuck to his cuffs. She listened while he told her about the stitch and the way the mirror had flinched. "Ida sewed thresholds," Maris said, as if confiding a family recipe. "Red thread through lintels in the spring," said grief phrased doorways. Said you can hem grief so it doesn't trail. She shook a small tin into her palm. Pins. A thimble. A curved needle blackened with use. 3 seams. She went on. Eyes on the house. Door. Mirror. Bell. You don't close them, you give them edges so they stop spilling into each other. She pressed a skein of red into his hand. Don't tie knots. Knots keep. We don't keep what hurts, he swallowed. And the other one? Maris's gaze hardened. Not unkind. It uses any mouth it can borrow. It's hungry for the part of you that listens. Feed the house with names and breath. Starve the other with disregard. She touched his wrist where his pulse beat. If it says a name you love, speak the name back, but place it somewhere else. Say, I remember you, but you belong in the living. Make paths, don't make cages. When she left, he stood a while with the red thread biting his palm, feeling the house watch him decide to try. Evening found him on the rug sewing a soft border around what he would not surrender. He pressed the cloth to the mirror and worked in long, slow bites, humming nonsense, letting the bell keep time. The voice behind the glass tried on his ex-wife's apology. Then his father's gruff laugh. Then his daughter's bright question, "Do you still have my drawing?" He flinched. His hand slipped. The needle jabbed deep. He tasted iron and made himself speak the path Maris had given him. "I remember you. But you belong in the living. I keep you there." The glass quivered. Furious. The diary blurted ink like a startled cuttlefish and resolved to keep breathing. He did. He breathed so the candle swayed with him. He stitched until the cloth was a loose, red-rimmed veil, until the seam itself felt like a heartbeat under his hands. At the last pass, his fingers moved on their own to tie off, the reflex of any mender, and the house groaned so deeply the floor buzzed no knots. He let the thread dangle. An unfinished sentence the house could finish in sleep. The green under the cloth thinned. Somewhere in the wall, the rope slackened as though a hand had released it. Then, a sly tap from the glass like teeth against a window pane, and the voice, amused, "You hemmed the tablecloth?" "Darling, you haven't hemmed the table." He took the hint to the bell. In the cellar's damp pocket, the bronze hung sulky and off-center, as if someone had twisted it years ago, and the wood had healed crooked around the wrongness. He touched the mounting plate. It wobbled. Behind it, soft crumble. Then a hollow. He pried gently, and a panel fell away. Sighing dirt. Inside lay a bundle wrapped in brittle muslin. He unrolled it to a scent like a dry bouquet, lavender heads crumbling. A child's charcoal sketch of a girl with a doll, 2 dark eyes. A black veil edged with hand stitches, and a small brass key on a ribbon. On the back of the sketch, Ida's right-leaning hand. "If you must cross, carry her hair." Daniel's throat tightened. He found, tucked in the veil's fold, a locket, oval and dented smooth by thumbs. It clicked open to a curl of pale hair and the ghost smell of soap. "Anchor," he said. Because the word arrived whole, he held the locket. The cellar pressed close, and for a whistling heartbeat, the house felt crowded with a warm presence, not the other one, but something patient, maternal, that knew how to wait. "Thank you," he told the dark. He closed the mounting, rehung the bell so it faced forward, and its voice when he tested it was smaller, truer, like a spoon tapped gently on a glass to call folks to pie. The storm rolled in early, carrying the strange, dry wind that made the eaves speak in a high keening. He arranged his odd altar in the sewing room, the stitched veil pinned lightly over the mirror, the locket warm in his palm, the silver cross around his neck, the red thread trailing like a lifeline to his wrist, and the bell rope looped once, twice, 3 times through his fingers. The doll watched from the rocking chair. Sockets vacant, mouth forever almost smiling. "We're trading," he told the room. Voice quiet but clean. What's lost for what's kept, memory for mirage. He rang the bell gently and spoke names as if laying out bread. Ida, who hemmed, Lena, who rang, Daniel, Who waits? The air pressed in. The veil's center darkened. Thin as old milk, something touched the room from the other side. First, the long. Pale hands, too many knuckles. A seam of shadow at each wrist then. Hesitant as a bird after thunder. A small hand that trembled with the effort of being. Daniel did not reach. He held up the locket. Hair to hair. Bone to bone. He said not a right. Just the truest sentence he could invent. The long hands recoiled. A breathless hiss ribboned through the cloth. The child's hand hovered, want and fear braided together. If you want it, he whispered, you take this, and you leave the marble. The veil quaked. Something snarled without a mouth. The bell tugged like a dog straining at lead. He held his place, remembering Maris's warning. Paths, not cages, trade. He repeated, and the house leaned all its weight to help him stand. Lightning stitched the fields blue-white, and the front door shuddered on its hinges. Maris came anyway. Wet to the knees. Basket thumping her leg like a metronome. She took one look at the room, the veil pulsing. The bell rope looped. Daniel's white-knuckled hands and set the basket down with a click. Walk the circuit, she said, already moving. And he followed as she brushed thresholds with her fingertips. Halls catch echoes. We teach them the right ones. They passed through every door in the house. Touching jams. Naming each room out loud, the kitchen with its tea. The parlor with its couch dent. The east bedroom with its bird wallpaper where no one slept. In each, she shook a little salt from a jar. Not as armor, but as a line drawn for a child to color inside. Back in the sewing room, she crouched and salted a pale seam across the floor. Door to mirror to bell. We're reminding it where edges are. She handed him a sprig of lavender from her pocket, crushing one for herself until its clean bitterness filled the wet air. Breath with it, she murmured, slow. Daniel, he obeyed. The house obeyed. Even the other thing paused. Interested, perhaps irritated that the game had grown rules. When the veil lifted itself like breath through a curtain, the mirror's surface bulged outward, a dark bubble thick with river glass greens. The long hand slid along the inside of the seam. Testing. She gave me so much love. The voice crooned his daughter's, his own, as a child. Lena's layered thinly on top. And you will too. If you just stay. Daniel wanted to answer. His throat trapezed toward yes. Maris's palm struck his shoulder, not cruel. Enough to wake. Name the living place, she said. He swallowed hard. I remember you, but you belong in the living. He rang the bell once. Twice. 3 times. And the rope burned his hand like a stern teacher. The diary's pages snapped and spread wide as wings. Now, they blazed. Letters tall and fierce. Daniel threw the locket into the swelling dark. It fell slowly, defying the room's gravity, and sank without ripple. A second later, the mirror coughed the marble up like a pit from bad fruit. It bounced off the sill, wobbled, and rolled for the rocking chair. Daniel snatched it. The cool of glass and the heat of small ownership meeting in his palm. The other thing struck the inside of the mirror with a sound like a fish hitting ice. The bell pealed and did not stop. He pressed the marble into the doll's socket. It clicked. Snug. Right. And for an instant, the porcelain face lost its smirk and looked, impossibly, relieved. The green in the glass thinned to sea smoke. The crack knotted itself back into hairline. Maris exhaled a laugh that was mostly sob. After, the house slumped into itself like an old horse let out of harness. Rain lost its edge and went soft. The diary shut and then, shyly, opened to two small words, "Thank you." Maris tucked hair behind her ear with hands that trembled only a little. "Not the end," she said. Matter of fact, as if they'd just finished mending a fence. Things that eat attention starve slow. Keep the seam, cover the glass at night, keep the door open for breath. Not for wandering, Daniel nodded, dizzy with the sudden ordinary. Together they wrapped the doll in the black veil and a sachet of lavender, laid it gently back into the trunk, and lowered the trunk into the crawl space. He left the key on the sill, visible, a promise of reversibility that soothed him. Maris adjusted the bell's hang until it made a clean, domestic chime. 3 for morning, 3 for night, she said. Ring it like grace. When she'd gone, he walked the rooms in a small procession door. Mirror. Bell-breathing names the way one waters plants. He slept at last without dream. Just before dawn, a quiet tapping woke him. 3 small clicks inside the wall, like teeth laid carefully in a dish. The sound went still. The house held him, bones and breath, and waited to see whether he would listen to the tapping or to the rain. The morning came tender. Washed clean by rain, Daniel lingered at the window, staring out over the fields where mist clung low, softening the edges of the world. For the first time, the house felt almost companionable, like an old dog finally settling at his feet. He rang the bell 3 times, voice steady as he spoke names. Ida, Lena, Daniel. The chime was delicate, even homely, but when he turned back to the sewing room, the diary lay open, ink still damp. Don't forget her, he frowned. Her who? The ink shivered, smudged, then clarified. The one that waits. His gut sank. She's not gone, he said softly. The doll, veiled and hidden in the trunk, gave no answer. The marble sat quiet in its socket, ordinary, and yet faint beneath the boards. He thought he heard it again. Tap, 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 teeth against wood. He whispered to himself the way Maris taught. I remember you. But you belong in the living. The tapping stilled, for the moment. The days blurred into uneasy routine. He worked at the kitchen table, forcing normalcy, each morning. The bell rang 3 times, and each night, 3 again. The diary sometimes lay blank. Sometimes whispered lines, keep the seam loose, or don't let the cloth knot. He began to hum while walking room to room, not out of fear, but as comfort, keeping sound alive. Yet the mirror itched at him. The cloth over it stirred as if in a draft. Though windows were closed, he tried not to look, tried not to listen. Still, one night, near midnight, he woke to the sound of his daughter's voice clear as day, whispering through the cloth. Daddy, come see what I made. He bit his tongue until it bled, whispering instead, I remember you, but you belong in the living. The cloth quivered like skin shuddering against cold. The bell gave a single approving chime, but the voice lingered. Sadder now. Then who will play with me? He pressed his hands over his ears. It laughed softly, as if the answer didn't matter. Maris returned every 3rd day now, carrying bread, milk, eggs. She eyed his haggard face. The thread burns along his fingers. You've been stitching too much, she said. He shook his head. The house asks for it. She sighed. Houses always ask. Doesn't mean you have to give them everything. They walked the fence together. She spoke of Ida again. How she'd grown quieter after Lena's passing. How she'd prayed too hard. She prayed not to lose the sound of her daughter's voice. Maris said, "But voices without bodies need somewhere to stay." She glanced toward the house. Uneasy. That's how the other one came. A hollow given shape. Daniel clenched his hands. "So every time I listen, you feed it?" She finished. "But sometimes feeding is safer than starving. Starved things bite." He stared at the mist-hung roofline. Shivering. "So I'm to keep feeding it, but only what it can't keep." Maris touched his arm. "Paths. Not cages, remember?" That night, the mirror grew restless. The cloth bulged outward. Thread seams tugging as though something pressed a face against it from the other side. He stitched again. Slower. Singing softly. Voice hoarse but steady. The diary's ink appeared mid-stitch. Don't listen. But it was too late. A voice seeped through. Soft as syrup. "Daniel. You're tired. Let me rest for you. Just one night." He kept sewing, repeating names like charms. The cloth pulsed. A handprint appeared. Long-fingered. Pressing hard enough to show through. The bell rope jerked wildly in his grip. Chimes spilling sharp into the room. He forced breath. Voice cracking. Ida. Lena. Daniel. Ida. Lena. Daniel. The hand withdrew. But the voice laughed low. Promising. "You're already mine when you dream." The marble in the doll's eye socket flickered green. He stitched until dawn. Fingers out. And collapsed across the table. He woke to the diary reading. "Don't fall asleep in silence." Exhaustion gnawed him hollow. He moved through the day as if underwater. Every sound distant. Muffled. He rang the bell 3 times. But it felt weak. Insubstantial. That night he brewed coffee strong enough to sting his tongue. Determined not to drift. Still. Near dawn. His eyes shut against his will. In his dream, the house stretched forever. Doors opened onto black corridors. At the far end, the child waited, doll in her arms. Smiling. "You don't have to wake," she said. "Stay here. We'll never be alone again." He turned. Tried to run. But the halls bent and folded. Behind him came the tall figure, hands brushing the ceiling, its head bent low. Faceless. Humming. He screamed himself awake. Heart hammering. The cloth over the mirror bulged outward. Seams snapped. The veil half torn. He lunged to restitch. Voice raw. "Ida. Lena. Daniel." The bell rang sharp. Saving him. When the mirror stilled, the diary read, "She nearly had you." Maris found him the next day, pale and shaking. "You've been letting it into your sleep," she accused. He rubbed his eyes. "I can't stop it. It's in every dream." She pressed something into his hand. "A sprig of rosemary?" Wrapped in red thread. "Keep it under your tongue when you sleep. Old trick. Keeps whispers out." He hesitated. "Will it work?" She shrugged. "Better than nothing. But remember, dreams are doors. You must name where they lead. Or else the house decides." That night, he placed the rosemary under his tongue. Bitter and sharp, sleep came. Shallow but dreamless. When he woke, the mirror cloth was untouched. The doll still. The bell silent. Relief washed him. Then he saw the diary open on the table. Words written in a hand not childlike. Not Ida's long. Spidery. Angular. Nice trick. I'll wait. The days grew harder. The house behaved almost politely. Doors creaked less. The bell chimed only when he rang it. But at night, faint scratching returned under the floorboards. Sometimes it was the marble rolling by itself. Sometimes it was the soft rattle of teeth. as though dropped one by one onto wood. The diary wrote less now, as if tired. Only short phrases. Hold the line. Don't not. One evening, desperate for company, he spoke aloud to the empty kitchen. I can't do this forever. What happens when I leave? Silence pressed close, then the diary. Slow and deliberate, you won't. He closed the book. Heart-clenching, outside. Owls called. Ordinary and alive. He envied them, upstairs. The mirror's cloth stirred as though breathing. By the 15th day, Daniel felt the line fray. Even Maris noticed. You're thinner, she said, setting down her basket. You're giving it too much. He laughed bitterly. What else do I have to give? She grasped his hands. Firm. Not your name, not your sleep, not your love. Give it only the scraps, the sound of doors opening, the hum of storms, the memory of footfalls. Keep yourself whole. He nodded. But the house had heard. That night, the voice came again, soft and close as breath in his ear. I don't want scraps. I want you. The mirror cloth bulged. The seam split. Green light bleeding out. The doll's eye flared bright. The bell rope jerked from his hand. He clutched the silver cross, shouting names until his throat tore. The diary blazed words across its page. Last seam. He stared at it. Heart hammering. Last seam. What did that mean? The bell screamed. The mirror bulged wider, and the voice crooned in tones both motherly and monstrous. Just one more stitch. Daniel, and we'll be whole. The diary's words scorched his vision. Last seam. His hands shook as he gathered thread, needle, and cloth. The mirror bulged like a lung. Sam's splitting. Green light spilling across the room in tides. From within, the tall shape pressed its head forward, faceless, its long fingers tapping like impatient drumming. The child's voice pleaded, Don't let go. Stitch me in. Maris's warning pounded in his ears' paths. Not cages, but what if the last seam was a doorway? Not a wall? He threaded the needle with red. Lips cracked, muttering names with each pass. Ida, Lena, Daniel. The cloth hissed under the punctures, alive with its own pulse. The tall figure leaned closer, bending, until its breath seeped through. Sour and cold. You've already given me your voice. It whispered in a dozen stolen tones. Give me your name, and I'll give you peace. The bell rope whipped like a live snake, ringing wild and uneven. Daniel forced the thread across the bulge. Each stitch smoked, his fingertips blistered. The diary screamed across its page in wild, spraveling letters. Do not knot. He obeyed, leaving the seam loose, dangling red like veins undone. The cloth sagged, quivered. For one searing second, he saw the child's small face in the mirror, green-eyed, hopeful before the tall shadow swallowed her whole. The cloth went slack. The bell stopped. Silence rushed in so hard it deafened him. The diary closed with a crack. He fell to his knees, thread burning in his hand. The dawn came pale, exhausted. Daniel sat in the sewing room, eyes hollow, watching dust swim through the first light. The mirror stood still, covered, stitched but unfinished. No bulge, no green, no voice, just silence. The doll lay veiled in the trunk, both marble eyes dim, its mouth no longer smirking but blank as if wiped of memory. The diary opened once, shyly, and in small, steady letters wrote, Thank you for staying. He touched the words, and they smeared to nothing, fading like chalk in rain, downstairs. The kettle whistled on its own. He rose, bones aching, and poured tea for two, out of habit, out of respect. The second cup steamed, untouched. As always, he sat across from it and whispered, "I'll keep the door open, but the rest stays hemmed." The bell rang 3 times on its own, soft and final. Outside, the mist lifted. The house sighed, lighter, though its bones would always creak with the memory of something waiting. He knew he would never leave. Not truly. Maris had been right. The house remembers differently. It would keep him here. Part of its breath, part of its seams, and he would stay watching, listening, feeding it only scraps, keeping the path open but never the cage. The tapping never returned. The mirror never bulged again. But sometimes, late at night, when the rain braided silver down the windows, Daniel swore he heard a child laugh softly in the walls, neither hungry nor afraid, just waiting for someone else to answer.